In the quiet moments before dawn, when shadows stretch long across ancient landscapes, there are places where time seems to pause. Here, beneath layers of earth and centuries of silence, rest the remnants of mysteries that refuse to surrender their secrets. These are not the grand monuments we celebrate in textbooks, but the enigmas that whisper questions we cannot yet answer. Imagine walking through a forest where massive stone pillars emerge from the undergrowth, their surfaces carved with symbols that predate our understanding of civilization. Picture diving beneath tropical waters to find a city of stone that defies everything we know about ancient engineering. Consider holding in your hands a sword forged with steel so advanced it would not be matched for centuries, yet crafted by people we assume knew nothing of such metallurgy. These are the echoes of the forgotten, the artifacts and places that challenge our comfortable narratives about the past. They persist not because we comprehend them, but precisely because we do not. Each discovery forces us to reconsider what we think we know about human ingenuity, ancient knowledge, and the true scope of our ancestors' achievements. Tonight, we journey to 10 places and artifacts that stand as monuments to mystery itself. From floating cities of stone to maps that seem to show impossible coastlines, from perfectly round spheres scattered across jungle floors to underground chambers that sing with otherworldly acoustics, each tells a story that history has yet to fully decode. These mysteries remind us that the past is not a closed book, but an ongoing conversation between what we find and what we cannot explain. They invite us to embrace wonder, to sit comfortably with questions that may never have answers, and to remember that some of the most profound discoveries are not solutions but deeper mysteries. The ancient world speaks to us still, not in the language of certainty, but in whispers of possibility. Let us listen. In the Western Pacific, where the ocean stretches endlessly toward distant horizons, lies a chain of islands called Pohnpei. Here, among coral reefs and mangrove swamps, rises one of the most perplexing archaeological sites on Earth. The local people call it Nan Madol, which means spaces between, and it is perhaps the most fitting name ever given to a mystery. Imagine approaching this place by boat in the early morning mist. As you draw closer to the eastern shore of Pohnpei, what first appears to be a natural reef gradually reveals itself as something far more extraordinary. Rising from the shallow waters are nearly 100 artificial islands, each one constructed from massive basalt logs stacked like enormous Lincoln logs. The stones are dark and weathered, some weighing as much as 50 tons, fitted together with such precision that they have withstood centuries of typhoons and tidal surges. This is not merely a collection of structures, but an entire city built upon the sea itself. Canals flow between the stone islands like streets of water, creating a Venice of the ancient Pacific. The largest structures tower 25 feet above the water, their walls built from hexagonal basalt columns that seem almost too perfect to be natural, yet too massive to be easily moved by human hands. The builders of Nan Madol faced a challenge that would daunt modern engineers. The basalt they used came from quarries on the opposite side of the island, requiring transport across miles of difficult terrain and then somehow moving these enormous stones across water to their final resting places. Some of the larger stones would require hundreds of people to move them, yet there is no evidence of the ramps, rollers, or massive workforce that such an undertaking would seem to demand. Local legends speak of the stones floating through the air, guided by the magical powers of twin sorcerers named Olisipa and Olosopa. While we might smile at such tales, they reflect a profound truth about this place. The engineering required to build Nan Madol seems so far beyond what we expect from its time period that magic feels like a reasonable explanation. The city flourished between 800 and 1600 years ago, serving as the ceremonial and political center of the Sodelur dynasty. Yet even at its peak, Nan Madol was never a bustling metropolis. It was a sacred precinct, a place where rulers performed rituals and where the dead were honored in elaborate ceremonies. The largest complex, called Nan Duvas, served as a royal mortuary, its walls rising in perfect symmetry from the surrounding waters. What makes Nan Madol truly mysterious is not just its construction, but its isolation. While other Pacific cultures built impressive stone monuments, from the Moai of Easter Island to the temples of Tahiti, None attempted anything quite like this floating city. The technology and organizational skills required seem to have appeared fully formed and then vanished just as completely when the city was abandoned. Walking through Nan Madol today feels like stepping into a dream. The tide pools reflect the sky between the massive stone walls, creating an endless play of light and shadow. Fish swim through what were once sacred chambers, and hermit crabs scuttle across stones that once supported the weight of ancient ceremonies. The jungle has begun to reclaim some of the outer structures, with vines creeping between the basalt columns and tropical birds nesting in the crevices. The precision of the stonework becomes even more remarkable when you consider that these builders had no metal tools, no wheels, no beasts of burden. They worked with stone tools and human muscle, yet achieved a level of engineering that seems to defy these limitations. Each basalt column had to be shaped and fitted with mathematical precision, creating walls that have survived not just centuries but the relentless assault of Pacific storms. Some researchers have suggested that the builders used a technique called controlled flooding, carefully timing their construction with the tides to float the massive stones into position. Others proposed that the entire landscape was different when Nan Madol was built, with higher sea levels that made transport easier. Yet these theories still cannot fully explain how such massive stones were lifted into position or how the builders achieved such perfect alignment. The mystery deepens when we consider the broader context of Pohnpei's history. The island has been inhabited for over 2,000 years, yet Nan Madol appears to represent a sudden leap in architectural sophistication. There are no earlier examples of large stone construction on the island, no gradual development of the techniques that would be needed for such a project. It is as if the knowledge appeared fully formed and then disappeared just as completely. Archaeological evidence suggests that the construction of Nan Madol required not just skilled labor, but also a highly organized society capable of mobilizing resources on a massive scale. The builders would have needed to coordinate the work of hundreds of people, manage complex logistics, and maintain the project over many generations. Yet we find no evidence of the kind of centralized authority or administrative systems that such a project would seem to require. The site's spiritual significance adds another layer to its mystery. Nan Madol was not just a feat of engineering but a sacred landscape, where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds became blurred. The flowing water between the stone islands created a kind of liquid architecture where movement and stillness, permanence and change existed in perfect balance. Each artificial island served a specific purpose in the complex social and religious life of the Sodalur rulers. Some were residential areas for the nobility, others were ceremonial spaces where elaborate rituals took place under the tropical sun. The royal compound occupied the largest island, its walls rising like a fortress from the lagoon, protecting the sacred spaces within from the eyes of common people. The basalt columns themselves tell a story of incredible patience and skill. Each one was carefully selected from the quarry, shaped to fit perfectly with its neighbors, and then transported across the island through dense jungle and over treacherous terrain. The fact that so many of these massive stones reached their destination intact speaks to a level of planning and execution that rivals any ancient civilization. Modern visitors to Nan Madol often report a sense of otherworldliness, as if the site exists outside normal time and space. The combination of massive stone construction and flowing water creates an atmosphere that feels both ancient and eternal. At high tide, the structures seem to float on the surface of the lagoon, their foundations hidden beneath the waves. At low tide, the full extent of the construction is revealed, showing the incredible scope of this ancient undertaking. The acoustic properties of Nan Madol add yet another dimension to its mystery. The stone walls and water channels create unique sound effects, amplifying voices and creating echoes that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It is easy to imagine how these acoustic phenomena might have enhanced the ritual ceremonies that took place here, making the voices of priests and rulers seem to come from the gods themselves. Recent archaeological work has revealed that the construction of Nan Madol was even more complex than previously thought. Beneath the visible structures lie earlier foundations, suggesting that the site was built in multiple phases over several centuries. Each generation of builders seems to have added their own innovations, creating a palimpsest of stone that records the evolution of ancient engineering techniques. The decline of Nan Madol is as mysterious as its construction. By the time European explorers arrived in the Pacific, the site had already been abandoned for centuries. The Sodalur dynasty that built it had fallen, leaving only oral traditions and crumbling stones to tell their story. Some legends speak of a curse that befell the city, while others suggest that the rulers became too isolated from their people, leading to rebellion and abandonment. Today, Nan Madol stands as a testament to the power of human imagination and determination. In a world where we often assume that technological progress moves in a straight line, this ancient city reminds us that our ancestors were capable of achievements that still inspire wonder and bewilderment. The stones continue to guard their secrets, standing silent in the Pacific waters, waiting for us to unlock the mysteries of their creation. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how Nan Madol was built, but why. What drove ancient islanders to undertake such a monumental project? What vision inspired them to create a city that seems to float between earth and sea, between the practical and the impossible? The stones themselves keep their secrets, standing silent in the waters of the Pacific, waiting for us to unlock their ancient code. As night falls over Nan Madol, the mysteries seem to deepen. The water laps gently against the ancient stones, creating a rhythm that has continued for centuries. In this place where water and stone meet, where the practical and the impossible converge, we are reminded that some questions are more beautiful than their answers. The city floats on, eternal and enigmatic, a testament to human ambition and the enduring power of mystery. In the dusty archives of ancient Mesopotamia, carved into clay tablets with the careful precision of scribes who lived 4,000 years ago, lies one of history's most puzzling documents. The Sumerian king list presents itself as a straightforward record of rulers and their reigns, yet it contains claims so extraordinary that they challenge everything we think we know about time, memory, and the nature of ancient record-keeping. Picture yourself in the ruins of Nippur, that sacred city where Sumerian priests maintained their most important archives. Here, among thousands of cuneiform tablets, archaeologists discovered multiple copies of a text that begins with words that seem to echo from the dawn of time itself. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Alulim became king and ruled for 28,800 years. 28,800 years, not 28 years, not even 280 years, but nearly 29 millennia for a single reign. This is how the Sumerian king list introduces us to the earliest rulers of humanity, and it is only the beginning of its temporal impossibilities. The document continues with equal audacity, listing king after king with reigns that stretch across geological ages. Al-Alangar ruled for 36,000 years. Dumuzid the shepherd held power for 36,000 years. These are not the reasonable lifespans of mortal rulers, but the epochs of gods walking among humans, of a time when the boundaries between divine and earthly authority had not yet been drawn. Modern scholars first encountered these tablets in the early 20th century, and their initial reaction was one of scholarly embarrassment. Here was a civilization renowned for its mathematical precision, its careful astronomical observations, its detailed legal codes, presenting what appeared to be fantasy as historical fact. How could the same culture that gave us the wheel, writing, and the first cities also produce such apparently absurd chronologies? Yet as researchers delved deeper into the structure and meaning of the king list, they began to realize that they were dealing with something far more sophisticated than simple confusion or primitive record-keeping. The document reveals a complex understanding of time that differs fundamentally from our modern linear conception of history. The king list divides ancient history into two distinct periods, separated by a great flood that the text describes as sweeping over the earth. Before this deluge, the antediluvian kings ruled for these impossible spans of time, their reigns measured not in human years but in cosmic cycles. After the flood, the document tells us, the kingship was lowered again from heaven, and suddenly the reign lengths become more reasonable, though still often extraordinary by modern standards. This flood serves as more than just a chronological marker in the Sumerian text. It represents a fundamental break in the nature of reality itself. a transition from a mythic age when gods and humans lived in close proximity to a more familiar world where divine influence was less direct. The flood becomes a lens through which the Sumerians viewed the entire arc of human history, dividing time into before and after, myth and reality, the age of gods and the age of mortals. What makes the king list particularly intriguing is how it gradually transitions from the clearly mythical to the historically verifiable. As the narrative moves forward in time, the reign lengths become shorter and more plausible. Kings begin to rule for hundreds of years rather than tens of thousands, then for decades rather than centuries. Eventually, the document arrives at rulers whose existence can be confirmed through independent archaeological evidence. This gradual transition suggests that the Sumerian scribes were not simply recording fantasy, but were attempting to bridge the gap between myth and history, between the sacred stories they had inherited and the political realities they observed. The king list becomes a kind of temporal map, showing how the divine realm gradually withdrew from direct involvement in human affairs. The astronomical precision embedded within these seemingly impossible numbers has fascinated researchers for decades. Some scholars have proposed that the antediluvian reign lengths encode sophisticated mathematical relationships, perhaps representing astronomical cycles or calendrical calculations that we have yet to fully understand. The number 43,200, for instance, which appears multiple times in the list, may correspond to certain planetary cycles or precession calculations. Others have suggested that these numbers represent not individual reigns, but dynasties or cultural periods, compressed into the reigns of symbolic kings. In this interpretation, Ululim's 28,800-year reign might represent the entire span of early human settlement in Mesopotamia, condensed into the story of a single ruler who embodies the essence of that age. The concept of the flood itself resonates far beyond Sumerian culture, appearing in myths and historical accounts from around the world. The biblical flood of Noah, the Greek story of Deucalion, the Hindu tales of Manu, and dozens of other flood narratives from cultures that had no apparent contact with each other. The Sumerian king list provides one of the earliest written accounts of this universal human memory, suggesting that some great catastrophe may indeed have marked a turning point in human civilization. Archaeological evidence has revealed that ancient Mesopotamia did experience periodic flooding from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and some of these floods were indeed catastrophic. Excavations at sites like and Shuruppak have uncovered thick layers of river silt that interrupt the normal sequence of human habitation, providing possible physical evidence for the floods described in ancient texts. But the flood in the king list serves a function beyond simple historical record-keeping. It provides a framework for understanding the relationship between divine authority and human governance. Before the flood, kingship was a direct gift from the gods, and rulers possessed quasi-divine status that allowed them to reign for cosmic spans of time. After the flood, kingship became more recognizably human, though still divinely sanctioned. The king list also reveals fascinating insights into Sumerian concepts of legitimacy and political continuity. Each city that held hegemony over Mesopotamia is said to have received the kingship as a transferable divine mandate. When one city's power waned, the kingship would move to another center, carrying with it the cosmic authority to rule. This concept of kingship as a movable divine institution helped later Mesopotamian rulers justify their authority and connect themselves to the cosmic order. As we read through the names and reigns recorded in the king list, we encounter rulers whose stories have become woven into the fabric of world literature. Gilgamesh appears as both a historical king of Uruk and the hero of humanity's first great epic poem. Dumuzi is remembered both as a ruler and as the shepherd god whose death and resurrection marked the changing seasons. These figures exist simultaneously in the realms of history and myth, embodying the Sumerian understanding that the two were not separate categories, but different aspects of a single cosmic reality. The document becomes even more intriguing when we consider that it was compiled not during the height of Sumerian power, but during the later Babylonian period, when Sumerian culture was already becoming ancient history. The scribes who created the king list were looking back across more than 1,000 years of history, attempting to preserve and make sense of traditions that were already old when their grandparents were young. In this light, the King List becomes not just a historical document, but a meditation on the nature of time itself. It asks profound questions about how we measure the significance of historical periods, how we understand the relationship between human and divine authority, and how we make sense of the vast spans of time that preceded our own brief moment in the cosmic story. The impossibly long reigns of the antediluvian kings begin to make sense when we understand them not as literal chronologies, but as expressions of a worldview in which time itself was qualitatively different in the age of the gods. These were not years as we understand them, but cosmic moments, each one pregnant with meaning that transcends ordinary temporal measurement. Today, as we read the Sumerian King List in the quiet of libraries and museums, we are confronted with a document that refuses to fit neatly into our modern categories of myth versus history. It stands as a reminder that ancient peoples possessed sophisticated ways of understanding time and meaning that we are only beginning to appreciate. In its impossible chronologies and divine genealogies, we glimpse a worldview in which the boundaries between human and cosmic history were far more fluid than we might imagine. In the mists of early medieval Europe, when kingdoms rose and fell like waves upon distant shores, there existed weapons that seemed to possess an almost supernatural quality. These were not the crude iron blades we might expect from an age we call the Dark Ages, but swords of such exceptional quality that they would not be matched in Europe for centuries to come. Inscribed upon their blades in letters that seemed to shimmer with their own authority was a single word: Ulfberht. To hold one of these swords today is to touch a mystery that spans continents and centuries. The blade feels impossibly light yet perfectly balanced, its steel showing a quality that seems almost luminous. When archaeologists first began studying these weapons in detail, they discovered something that challenged every assumption about medieval metallurgy. These swords, forged between 800 and 1100 years ago, were made from crucible steel of a purity that European smiths would not achieve until the Industrial Revolution. Imagine the workshop where such a blade was born. Not the simple forge we might picture, with a village blacksmith hammering away at rough iron, but a place of almost alchemical precision. The smith who created an Ulfberht sword possessed knowledge that set him apart from his contemporaries, techniques that allowed him to work with steel that was decades or even centuries ahead of its time. The secret lay in the steel itself. While most medieval European weapons were forged from iron with varying amounts of carbon hammered in through laborious pattern welding, Ulfberht swords were made from what we now call crucible steel. This was steel that had been heated to such extraordinary temperatures that all impurities were burned away, leaving behind a material of almost crystalline purity. The carbon content was precisely controlled, creating a blade that was both incredibly hard and remarkably flexible. This crucible steel was not unknown to the medieval world, but it was vanishingly rare in Europe. The techniques for creating it were closely guarded secrets, practiced primarily in distant lands far to the east. In places like Damascus and Samarkand, in the workshops of master smiths whose names have been lost to time, furnaces burned hot enough to achieve the temperatures needed for this almost magical transformation of raw iron into perfect steel. How did such steel reach the workshops where Ulfberht swords were forged? The answer lies in the vast trading networks that connected the medieval world in ways that we are only now beginning to understand. Viking merchants and warriors, those legendary seafarers who reached as far as Constantinople and Baghdad, brought back more than gold and silver from their journeys. They carried with them ingots of this precious steel, raw material that would be transformed into weapons worthy of kings and heroes. The name Ulfberht itself holds clues to this mystery. It appears on swords found across a vast territory, from Norway to Ukraine, from England to Russia. Yet this was not the signature of a single smith, but rather a brand, a mark of quality that guaranteed the bearer was carrying a weapon of exceptional value. Like the finest luxury goods of any age, Ulfberht became a name that spoke of craftsmanship, reliability, and prestige. The process of creating an Ulfberht sword required not just exceptional materials, but extraordinary skill. The smith had to understand how to work with steel that behaved differently from anything his local competitors might handle. The forging had to be done at precise temperatures, the cooling carefully controlled, the final sharpening achieved through techniques that pushed the boundaries of medieval technology. Recent experiments by modern blacksmiths have revealed just how challenging this process would have been. Using period tools and techniques, attempting to recreate the quality of Ulfberht steel, skilled craftsmen have found themselves pushing the limits of what medieval technology could achieve. The furnaces had to burn hotter than normal, requiring specially prepared charcoal and carefully controlled airflow. The steel had to be worked while it was at exactly the right temperature, a narrow window that required perfect timing and intuitive understanding of the material. The geographical distribution of Ulfberht swords tells a story of medieval globalization that challenges our assumptions about the supposed isolation of the Dark Ages. These weapons have been found in graves across northern and eastern Europe, carried by warriors who valued them enough to take them into the afterlife. Each sword represents a connection to distant lands, a link in a chain of trade and cultural exchange that spanned continents. Archaeological analysis has revealed that not all swords bearing the Ulfberht inscription were created equal. Some show the telltale signs of true crucible steel, with its characteristic patterns and exceptional quality. Others appear to be attempts at forgery, created by local smiths trying to capitalize on the reputation of the Ulfberht brand, but lacking access to the proper materials or techniques. These inferior copies remind us that even in the medieval world, reputation and branding mattered. The technology transfer implied by Ulfberht swords raises fascinating questions about how knowledge moved across the medieval world. Did master smiths from the Islamic world travel north to teach their techniques? Were there workshops in places like Kiev or Novgorod where Eastern and Western traditions merged? Or did Viking traders simply bring back not just steel ingots, but also detailed knowledge of how to work with them? The decline of Ulfberht sword production around 1100 years ago coincides with changes in both trade routes and military technology. The Crusades began to open new connections between East and West, but they also disrupted some of the older trading networks that had made crucible steel available in Northern Europe. At the same time, changes in armor and fighting techniques began to favor different types of weapons, reducing demand for the exceptionally high-quality steel that made Ulfberht swords special. What makes these swords particularly remarkable is how they demonstrate the sophisticated nature of medieval craftsmanship at a time when Europe is often characterized as backward and primitive. The smiths who created Ulfberht swords possessed not just technical skill but deep understanding of metallurgy, chemistry, and physics, even if they would not have used those modern terms to describe their knowledge. The quality control, evident in genuine Ulfberht swords, suggests a level of organization and standardization that we might not expect from medieval workshops. Each authentic blade shows remarkable consistency in its steel quality, suggesting that whoever controlled the Ulfberht brand maintained strict standards for both materials and craftsmanship. This was not random production, but carefully managed manufacturing that maintained quality across decades of production. Modern analysis using electron microscopy and spectral analysis has revealed details about Ulfberht steel that would have been invisible to medieval eyes but crucial to its performance. The carbon is distributed with almost mathematical precision throughout the steel matrix. Impurities that would weaken lesser metals have been virtually eliminated. The grain structure of the steel shows the kind of uniformity that speaks to perfect temperature control during the forging process. The cultural impact of these exceptional weapons extended far beyond their practical use in battle. To carry an Ulfberht sword was to make a statement about one's status, wealth, and connections. These were not just tools but symbols, objects that carried with them the prestige of distant lands and exotic technologies. They appear in artwork and literature mentioned in sagas and songs as treasures worthy of heroes and kings. The mystery of Ulfberht swords reminds us that the medieval world was far more connected and sophisticated than popular imagination often suggests. These weapons represent a network of trade, knowledge, and craftsmanship that spanned from the workshops of Central Asia to the burial mounds of Scandinavia. They speak to human ingenuity and the power of commerce to carry not just goods but ideas across vast distances. Today, as archaeologists continue to discover Ulfberht swords in graves and hoards across Europe, each find adds another piece to the puzzle of medieval technology transfer. These blades, silent for centuries in the earth, still hold secrets about how knowledge moved across the medieval world, how craftsmen pushed the boundaries of their materials and techniques, and how a single word inscribed in steel could carry with it the authority of distant masters and forgotten techniques. In museums around the world, Ulfberht swords rest in climate-controlled cases, their steel still gleaming after more than 1,000 years. They stand as testament to human ambition and skill, reminders that innovation and excellence have always found ways to transcend the boundaries of time and geography. The word Ulfberht, etched in letters that seem to glow with their own inner light, continues to speak across the centuries of mastery achieved and mysteries yet to be fully understood. In the shadow of Egypt's ancient pyramids, among the countless treasures that have emerged from tombs and temples over the centuries, there sits a small wooden object that has captured imaginations and sparked debates for more than a century. It measures just over 5 inches in length, carved from sycamore wood with the careful precision that marked all Egyptian craftsmanship. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a simple bird figurine, the kind of votive offering that filled Egyptian tombs by the thousands. But look more closely, and this little wooden creature begins to reveal mysteries that challenge our understanding of ancient knowledge and human dreams of flight. The artifact was discovered in 1898 in a tomb at Saqqara, that vast necropolis that served ancient Memphis for over 3,000 years. Among the personal possessions of an official named Piri Reis, archaeologists found this curious object, initially catalogued simply as a bird model and placed in storage at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. For decades, it gathered dust among thousands of other artifacts, unremarkable to curators who saw it as just another example of Egyptian religious art. But in 1969, everything changed. Dr. Khalil Messiha, an Egyptian physician with a passion for archaeology, was examining the museum's collection when this particular artifact caught his eye. What he saw was not simply a stylized bird, but something far more intriguing. The proportions were wrong for any known Egyptian bird art, the wings positioned in a way that seemed more functional than decorative, the body shaped with an aerodynamic precision that suggested purposes beyond mere representation. The Saqqara bird, as it came to be known, possesses features that distinguish it from typical Egyptian bird figurines. Its wings are perfectly straight and horizontal, not swept back as in most bird art. The body is streamlined in a way that suggests an understanding of how air flows around moving objects. Most remarkably, the tail section appears to have been designed as a vertical stabilizer, much like those found on modern aircraft. If this was indeed meant to represent a bird, it was unlike any bird that ever flew over the Nile. Dr. Messiha's observations sparked a controversy that continues to this day. Could this small wooden object represent evidence that ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge of aerodynamic principles? Might it be a model of some kind of gliding device, perhaps used for ceremonial purposes or as a toy that demonstrated principles of flight? The very possibility challenged conventional understanding of what ancient peoples knew and what they might have achieved. When researchers began to examine the Saqqara bird more closely, they discovered details that seemed to support the flight theory. The wings show a slight dihedral angle, meaning they slope slightly upward from the body, a design feature that provides stability in flight. The center of gravity appears to be positioned in exactly the right place for stable gliding. The overall proportions match those of successful glider designs, as if whoever carved this object understood the fundamental principles that govern flight. Modern aerodynamic testing has yielded intriguing but inconclusive results. Some experiments have shown that copies of the Saqqara bird can indeed glide when launched properly, exhibiting stable flight characteristics that suggest sophisticated understanding of aerodynamics. Other tests have been less successful, with replicas tumbling or diving when thrown. The results seem to depend on precise weight distribution and launching technique, factors that might have been crucial to any ancient use of such devices. The possibility that this object represents a gliding toy or ceremonial device opens fascinating windows into ancient Egyptian knowledge and interests. We know that the Egyptians were keen observers of natural phenomena, that their architects and engineers possessed sophisticated understanding of physics and mathematics. Their pyramids required precise calculation of angles and forces. Their irrigation systems demonstrated mastery of fluid dynamics. Is it so impossible that they might have observed the flight of birds and attempted to replicate it in miniature? Ancient Egyptian art and literature reveal a culture fascinated by flight. The god Thoth was often depicted with the wings of an ibis, while the goddess Isis was shown with wings that could carry her across vast distances. Egyptian mythology is filled with flying serpents, winged discs, and deities who soar through both earthly and celestial realms. The concept of flight was deeply embedded in Egyptian religious thought, representing divine power and the soul's journey to the afterlife. Some researchers have suggested that the Saqqara bird might represent a weather vane designed to show wind direction with its aerodynamic shape. This would explain its streamlined form while placing it within the context of practical Egyptian technology. Ancient Egyptians were skilled sailors who understood wind patterns and the importance of weather prediction. A device that could reliably indicate wind direction would have been valuable for both practical and ceremonial purposes. Others have proposed that the object might be a boomerang, pointing to similar devices used by ancient hunters around the world. Some Egyptian wall paintings do show curved throwing sticks used in bird hunting, and the aerodynamic properties that make the Saqqara bird suitable for gliding might also have made it effective as a returning projectile. This interpretation would place the artifact firmly within known Egyptian technology while still acknowledging its sophisticated design. The ceremonial interpretation remains compelling to many scholars. Ancient Egyptian religious practices often involved symbolic representations of divine concepts, and an object that could demonstrate the principles of flight might have played an important role in rituals related to the soul's journey after death. The Egyptians believed that the deceased could transform into birds to travel between the earthly and divine realms, making a flying model potentially significant in funerary contexts. What makes the Saqqara bird particularly intriguing is its apparent uniqueness. Despite extensive archaeological work in Egypt over more than 2 centuries, no other objects quite like it have been discovered. This could suggest that it represents a unique experiment or innovation by its creator, someone who was exploring concepts that were not widely understood or accepted. Alternatively, it might indicate that such objects were rare and precious, created only for special purposes or individuals. The dating of the Saqqara bird adds another layer to its mystery. The tomb where it was found dates to approximately 200 years before the Common Era, during the Ptolemaic period when Egypt was ruled by Greek dynasties following Alexander the Great's conquest. This was a time of cultural fusion, when Greek scientific knowledge blended with traditional Egyptian wisdom. Could the Saqqara bird represent the fruit of this intellectual cross-pollination, combining Egyptian craftsmanship with Greek theoretical understanding? Recent computer modeling has attempted to analyze the Saqqara bird's flight characteristics with greater precision than physical testing allows. These digital simulations suggest that the object would indeed be capable of stable gliding flight under the right conditions, with performance characteristics that fall within the range of successful modern model aircraft. The mathematical precision required to achieve such performance seems remarkable for an object created over 2,000 years ago. The mystery deepens when we consider the broader context of ancient experiments with flight. Legend speaks of Daedalus and Icarus in Greek mythology, while Chinese texts describe kites and flying devices from early periods. The desire to fly appears to be a universal human dream, and it would not be surprising if ancient peoples made practical attempts to achieve it, even if only in miniature or symbolic form. Modern recreations of the Saqqara bird have been attempted by craftsmen and engineers seeking to understand its original purpose. Some have added weight to the nose to improve balance, others have modified the tail section to enhance stability. These experiments have shown that small changes in design can dramatically affect flight performance, suggesting that whoever created the original may have engaged in similar trial and error refinement. The controversy surrounding the Saqqara bird reflects broader questions about ancient knowledge and capabilities. How much did ancient peoples know about principles that we consider modern discoveries? Did they achieve technological capabilities that were later lost and had to be rediscovered? The little wooden object sitting in the Cairo Museum continues to challenge our assumptions and invite speculation about the true extent of ancient wisdom. Whether the Saqqara bird was designed as a glider, a weather vane, a boomerang, or simply an artistic representation of divine flight, it stands as a testament to the sophisticated thinking of its creator. In its carefully carved proportions and aerodynamic features, we see evidence of observation, experimentation, and understanding that speaks to the universal human desire to push beyond the boundaries of the possible. Today, as aviation technology reaches toward ever greater sophistication, this ancient wooden artifact reminds us that the dream of flight is as old as human civilization itself. In museums and research laboratories, the Saqqara bird continues to inspire wonder and debate, a small wooden mystery that carries within its simple form questions about knowledge, innovation, and the eternal human desire to soar above the earthly realm into the boundless freedom of the sky. Across the landscape of ancient Roman territory, from Britain's misty moors to the sun-baked hills of modern-day France, archaeologists have uncovered objects that defy every attempt at explanation. These mysterious artifacts are found in unexpected places, buried in fields, hidden in villa foundations, scattered through military camps. Each one is roughly the size of a human fist, crafted from bronze with the kind of precision that speaks to skilled metalworking. Each possesses 12 pentagonal faces with circular holes of varying sizes piercing each surface and small knobs protruding from the corners where the faces meet. They are called Roman Dodecahedra, named for their 12-sided geometric form, and they represent one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles. Despite more than 2.5 centuries of discovery and study, despite the recovery of over 100 examples across Europe, despite the focused attention of countless scholars and enthusiasts, no one can say with certainty what these objects were meant to do. The first recorded discovery of a Roman dodecahedron occurred in 1739, when workers excavating near a Roman villa in England unearthed a bronze object unlike anything in the known catalogue of Roman artifacts. The finder, intrigued by its unusual form, preserved it carefully, beginning a tradition of curiosity that continues to this day. Since then, these enigmatic objects have appeared with surprising regularity across territories that once formed the northern frontier of the Roman Empire. What makes the dodecahedra particularly mysterious is not just their unusual form but their absence from Roman literature. The Romans were meticulous record keepers, documenting everything from military equipment to household goods, from religious ceremonies to engineering techniques. Their writers described cooking utensils and gardening tools, surveying instruments and children's toys. Yet nowhere in the vast corpus of Roman literature is there a single mention of these 12-sided objects that appear to have been common enough to be found across hundreds of miles of territory. This literary silence is all the more puzzling because the Romans were familiar with dodecahedral geometry. The shape appears in their mathematical texts, described by writers like Pliny the Elder as one of the perfect solids identified by Greek mathematicians. Roman architects and engineers used complex geometric principles in their construction projects, creating domes and arches that required sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional forms. They knew what a dodecahedron was in theory, yet they left no record of these bronze implementations that their craftsmen were clearly producing. The physical characteristics of the dodecahedra suggest objects designed for specific, practical purposes rather than mere decoration or curiosity. Each face contains a circular hole, but the sizes of these holes vary both between different objects and between the faces of individual specimens. Some holes are barely large enough to admit a finger, others could accommodate a substantial dowel or rod. The knobs that protrude from each vertex are carefully shaped and positioned as if designed to serve some functional role. The bronze from which most dodecahedra are made was a precious material in the Roman world, expensive enough that it would not have been wasted on frivolous objects. The craftsmanship evident in surviving examples shows skilled workmanship with smooth surfaces, precisely formed holes, and carefully finished details. These were not crude experiments or casual creations, but carefully made objects that represented significant investment in both materials and labor. The geographical distribution of dodecahedra discoveries provides additional clues to their mystery. They appear almost exclusively in areas that formed the northern and western frontiers of the Roman Empire, regions like Gaul, Britain, and the Germanic provinces. Very few have been found in the Mediterranean heartland of Roman civilization, in places like Italy or Greece where Roman culture was most established. This distribution suggests that dodecahedra may have served purposes specific to frontier conditions or Celtic and Germanic cultural traditions. The dating of dodecahedron finds places them primarily in the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Common Era, during the height of Roman territorial expansion and the period when Roman culture was most actively blending with local traditions in the provinces. This timing coincides with the Roman military's need for specialized equipment adapted to Northern European conditions, as well as with the period when Roman craftsmen were most actively incorporating local techniques and traditions into their work. Theories about the purpose of Roman dodecahedra have proliferated almost as rapidly as the objects themselves have been discovered. The most persistent suggestion is that they served as surveying instruments used by Roman engineers to measure angles and distances during construction projects. The varying hole sizes could have accommodated different measuring rods, while the geometric precision of the form would have provided consistent reference points for calculations. Others have proposed that dodecahedra were used as gauges for military equipment, perhaps to ensure that spear shafts or arrowheads met standard specifications. The Roman military was famous for its standardization of equipment, and an object that could quickly verify the dimensions of various components would have been valuable for maintaining quality control. The holes of different sizes could have accommodated different types of equipment, while the knobs might have served as handles or positioning aids. The religious interpretation of dodecahedra draws on the symbolic significance of geometric forms in Roman and Celtic spirituality. The number 12 held sacred meaning in many ancient cultures, representing completeness and cosmic order. The pentagonal faces of the dodecahedron connect to traditions of sacred geometry that were important to both Roman philosophers and Celtic druids. These objects might have served as religious instruments used in ceremonies or rituals that required precise geometric symbolism. A more practical theory suggests that dodecahedra were used as tools for working with rope or cord, perhaps to create specific knots or to measure consistent lengths. The holes could have guided the passage of rope, while the knobs provided anchor points or tension controls. This interpretation would explain their presence in military camps, where rope work was essential for everything from tent construction to siege equipment. The candle-making theory proposes that dodecahedra served as holders for multiple candles, with the holes accommodating wicks of different sizes and the bronze construction providing durability for repeated use. This would explain their presence in civilian contexts and their craftsmanship quality, as good lighting was always valuable in the Roman world. The geometric form would have provided stability while allowing air circulation around multiple flames. Some researchers have suggested that these objects were used as tools for teaching mathematics or astronomy, with the geometric form serving as a three-dimensional aid for understanding complex calculations. Roman education included substantial mathematical training, and an object that could demonstrate geometric principles while serving practical measuring functions would have been valuable for tutors and students alike. The knitting theory, popular among some enthusiasts, proposes that dodecahedra were used to create the fingers of gloves, with the holes serving as guides for different finger sizes, and the knobs helping to maintain tension in the work. This interpretation draws on evidence that Romans did produce knitted textiles, though the archaeological record for Roman knitting techniques remains limited. Recent scientific analysis has provided new insights into dodecahedron construction and use patterns. Wear marks on surviving examples suggest that many were handled frequently and used for practical purposes rather than simply stored as ceremonial objects. The bronze alloy composition varies between specimens, indicating that they were produced by different workshops using locally available materials rather than manufactured in a single location and distributed throughout the empire. Computer modeling has tested various functional theories by simulating how dodecahedra might perform in different roles. These digital experiments have shown that the objects would indeed function effectively as surveying instruments, measuring gauges, or rope-working tools, though they would be equally effective in several other proposed roles. The versatility of the basic design makes it difficult to determine which, if any, of the suggested functions was the primary intended use. The mystery of the Roman Dodecahedra reflects broader questions about how much we truly understand about daily life in the ancient world. Despite the wealth of Roman literature and the abundance of archaeological evidence, there remain aspects of Roman technology and culture that have vanished without clear traces. These bronze enigmas remind us that even the most thoroughly documented civilizations in history still hold secrets. Modern attempts to recreate dodecahedra using Roman-era techniques have revealed the skill required to produce these objects. The precise geometric form requires careful planning and execution, while the consistent hole sizes and smooth finishes demand considerable craftsmanship experience. Whoever made these objects possessed both theoretical understanding of geometry and practical metalworking skills of the highest order. The continuing discovery of new dodecahedra keeps the mystery alive. Each find provides additional data about distribution patterns, construction techniques, and possible functions, but also raises new questions about why these objects were made and used. Museums across Europe house collections of these enigmatic artifacts, each one a silent testimony to Roman ingenuity and our limitations in understanding the past. Today, as archaeologists continue to uncover Roman dodecahedra in excavations across Europe, each discovery adds both clarity and confusion to our understanding. These 12 faced mysteries represent the humbling reality that even the most thoroughly studied ancient civilizations can surprise us, that objects can outlast the knowledge of their purposes, and that sometimes the most intriguing artifacts are those that refuse to reveal their secrets. In their geometric perfection and functional ambiguity, the Roman dodecahedra stand as monuments to human creativity and the enduring power of mystery itself. In the year 1513, as European explorers were still coming to terms with the existence of the New World, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis completed a map that would centuries later spark one of history's most intriguing cartographic mysteries. Working in the cosmopolitan port city of Gallipoli, where traders and sailors from across the known world gathered to share tales and knowledge, Piri Reis created what appeared to be an impossible document, a map that seemed to show coastlines and geographical features that no European had yet officially discovered. The map itself is a fragment, roughly 3 feet by 2 feet, drawn on gazelle skin with the careful precision that marked the finest Ottoman cartography. What survives today represents only about 1/3 of the original work, showing the western coasts of Europe and Africa alongside a remarkably detailed depiction of the eastern coastline of South America. But it was not these known territories that would eventually capture the world's attention. It was what appeared at the bottom edge of the map, in a region that seemed to show features of a land that would not be officially discovered for another 3 centuries, Antarctica. Piri Reis himself left detailed notes about his sources written in the flowing script of Ottoman Turkish around the margins of his creation. He claimed to have based his work on more than 20 different maps and charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Among his sources, he specifically mentioned a map that had been captured from a Spanish sailor and charts that he claimed had been drawn by Christopher Columbus himself. Most intriguingly, he referenced ancient maps that he described as being so old that their origins were lost in the mists of time. The admiral was no amateur cartographer, but a skilled navigator and scholar who had spent years collecting geographical knowledge from across the Ottoman Empire's vast territories. His position in the Ottoman Navy gave him access to charts and maps gathered from captured ships, while his scholarly interests led him to seek out ancient texts and documents from libraries and private collections. The map that emerged from this research represented not just his own observations but a synthesis of geographical knowledge accumulated over centuries. For more than 400 years, the Piri Reis map remained a curiosity in the archives of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, known to scholars but not widely studied. It was not until 1929 that it attracted serious international attention when a German Orientalist named Paul Kahler brought it to the notice of the wider academic community. What Kahler observed was disturbing to conventional understanding of exploration history. The map appeared to show geographical features that should have been unknown to 16th century cartographers. The South American coastline depicted on the map showed remarkable accuracy, including details of bays, rivers, and coastal features that matched modern surveys with startling precision. Even more puzzling, the map seemed to show the outline of what appeared to be Antarctica, complete with coastal features that would not be officially mapped until the 20th century. The positioning and proportions of this southern landmass suggested knowledge that no explorer of Piri Reis's time should have possessed. Modern analysis of the map has revealed both its extraordinary aspects and its limitations. The South American coastline, while remarkably accurate in many respects, shows some distortions that are consistent with the navigation techniques available in the early 16th century. The positioning of various islands and coastal features suggests that Piri Reis was working with information gathered by actual exploration rather than pure speculation. Yet the apparent depiction of Antarctic features remains deeply puzzling. The key to understanding the Piri Reis map may lie in the ancient sources that the admiral claimed to have consulted. Throughout history, maps and geographical knowledge have been passed down through generations of navigators, often preserved in forms that outlasted the civilizations that created them. Ancient Phoenician and Carthaginian navigators, for instance, are known to have possessed detailed knowledge of Atlantic coastlines that was later lost when their civilizations fell. Some researchers have suggested that the apparent Antarctic features on the map might actually represent a misunderstood or distorted depiction of the southern tip of South America. Cartographic projection, the mathematical challenge of representing a spherical Earth on a flat surface, can create distortions that make familiar coastlines appear in unexpected forms. What Piri Reis interpreted as a separate southern continent might have been Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, depicted in a projection that made them appear more extensive than they actually are. The question of how Piri Reis obtained such detailed information about South American geography before it was widely available in European sources points to the complex networks of knowledge exchange that existed in the 16th century. The Ottoman Empire, straddling Europe and Asia, was uniquely positioned to gather information from multiple sources. Ottoman merchants and diplomats maintained contacts with European powers, while also having access to Islamic geographical traditions that preserved knowledge from earlier periods. The map's annotations provide crucial insights into Piri Reis's working methods and sources. He explicitly mentions using a map drawn by Columbus, which suggests that geographical information was circulating more widely than official exploration records might indicate. Columbus himself claimed to have consulted ancient maps and charts, and it is possible that some of the geographical knowledge attributed to his discoveries was actually based on earlier, forgotten explorations. The Islamic world had preserved much geographical knowledge from ancient Greek and Roman sources, maintaining libraries and scholarly traditions that kept alive information that had been lost in medieval Europe. When Piri Reis claimed to have consulted maps dating back to Alexander the Great, he may have been referring to this preserved tradition of ancient geographical knowledge, transmitted through centuries of Islamic scholarship. Recent computer analysis has attempted to determine the projection used in creating the Piri Reis Map, seeking to understand how the admiral translated spherical geographical knowledge onto a flat surface. These studies have revealed that the map appears to use a sophisticated projection technique that accurately represents distances and directions from a specific viewpoint, suggesting that its creator possessed advanced mathematical knowledge about cartographic principles. The controversy surrounding the map's Antarctic features has led to extensive debate about what the southern portions actually represent. Some researchers argue that they show an ice-free Antarctica as it might have appeared thousands of years ago, implying that the map was based on extremely ancient sources that preserved geographical knowledge from prehistoric times. Others contend that the features represent known southern lands depicted in unfamiliar projections or combined with speculative geography. The paleoclimatic evidence regarding Antarctica adds another layer to the mystery. Scientific studies have shown that parts of Antarctica were indeed ice-free at various points in the distant past, though the most recent such periods occurred long before any known human civilization could have mapped them. The possibility that some form of advanced ancient civilization possessed geographical knowledge that was later lost and partially preserved in later maps remains one of the most intriguing aspects of the Piri Reis mystery. Archaeological evidence from South America itself has revealed that ancient civilizations possessed more extensive geographical knowledge than was previously recognized. The Inca and their predecessors maintained detailed knowledge of South American geography, including coastal and inland features that would not be officially mapped by Europeans until centuries after the conquest. It is possible that some of this indigenous knowledge found its way into the charts that Piri Reis consulted. The map's depiction of various Atlantic islands, some of which correspond to known locations while others remain unidentified, suggests that it was compiled from sources with varying degrees of accuracy and completeness. Medieval and early modern maps often included legendary islands and speculative geography alongside genuine geographical knowledge, creating documents that mixed fact with legend in ways that can be difficult to disentangle. Modern attempts to trace the specific sources used by Piri Reis have been hampered by the loss of most of the original maps and charts that he claimed to have consulted. The Columbus map that he mentioned, for instance, has never been definitively identified, though several candidates exist in various archives. The ancient maps that he referenced may have been destroyed in the numerous conflicts and library burnings that marked the turbulent history of the Eastern Mediterranean. The technical skill evident in the Piri Reis map reflects the high level of Ottoman cartographic knowledge in the early 16th century. The Ottoman Empire, with its extensive maritime territories and trading networks, had developed sophisticated navigation techniques and map-making traditions that rivaled anything available in contemporary Europe. The precision of the map's construction suggests that its creator possessed not just access to good source materials, but also the technical knowledge to synthesize them effectively. The enduring mystery of the Piri Reis map lies not just in what it appears to show, but in what it represents about the transmission of geographical knowledge across time and cultures. It stands as a reminder that human exploration and discovery have often been more complex and interconnected than official histories suggest. In its careful lines and puzzling features, the map embodies the possibility that knowledge once possessed can be lost, partially preserved, and rediscovered in unexpected forms. Today, as the original map rests in the climate-controlled environment of Topkapi Palace, scholars continue to debate its implications for our understanding of exploration history and ancient geographical knowledge. Whether it represents a remarkable synthesis of early 16th century cartographic knowledge or evidence of more ancient and sophisticated geographical traditions, the Piri Reis map remains one of cartography's most intriguing puzzles, a document that continues to challenge our assumptions about what was known and when it was discovered. In the remote wilderness of New Zealand's South Island, where ancient forests cling to mountainsides and caves tunnel deep into limestone cliffs, 3 explorers made a discovery in 1986 that seemed to defy the natural order of time itself. Dr. Paul Willis, Maggie Dewar, and Mark Wagstaff were exploring the cave systems of Mount Owen, following passages that wound through rock formations millions of years old, when they stumbled upon something that appeared to belong to a world that had vanished long before human memory. There, preserved in the perpetual twilight of the cave, lay a foot. Not the delicate bones of some small creature, but a massive scaled appendage that seemed almost reptilian in its proportions. The preservation was so extraordinary that the explorers initially wondered if they had discovered the remains of some unknown living creature, perhaps injured and recently deceased. The scales still retained their texture, the flesh appeared almost fresh, and the enormous talons curved with predatory menace that seemed ready to grasp at any moment. What they had found was the mummified foot of a moa, one of the giant flightless birds that had once dominated New Zealand's landscapes. But this was no ordinary archaeological specimen. The preservation was so complete, so startlingly fresh in appearance, that it challenged everything the explorers thought they knew about extinction, time, and the persistence of organic matter in the natural world. The moa that once bore this fearsome appendage had been a creature of almost mythical proportions. Standing up to 12 feet tall and weighing as much as 500 pounds, these were birds that transformed the very concept of avian life. They possessed legs like tree trunks, necks that could stretch high into forest canopies, and feet armed with talons capable of devastating defense against any predator brave enough to challenge them. When the first Polynesian settlers arrived in New Zealand around 700 years ago, they encountered a land where these giants roamed freely, birds so large they could look a human directly in the eye. The cave environment that preserved this remarkable foot had created conditions almost miraculous in their effectiveness. The constant cool temperature, the low humidity, and the absence of scavenging creatures had combined to create a natural mummification chamber. Here, protected from the decay that claims most organic matter within years or decades, the Moa's foot had remained virtually unchanged for centuries, a time capsule from an ecosystem that no longer exists. Carbon dating of the Mount Owen specimen revealed that this particular Moa had died approximately 3,000 years ago, placing its death in the middle period of Moa evolutionary history, long before human arrival in New Zealand. This timing adds poignancy to the discovery, as it represents a creature from the golden age of Moa civilization, when these birds lived without any knowledge of the changes that would eventually lead to their extinction. The scale patterns visible on the preserved foot tell stories of adaptation and evolution that scientists are still working to fully understand. Each scale shows the kind of detail that is usually lost within days of death, revealing textures and structures that provide insights into how these massive birds moved through their environment. The foot appears designed for both power and precision, capable of supporting enormous weight while providing the agility needed to navigate New Zealand's varied terrain. The talons themselves are masterpieces of evolutionary engineering. Curved like scimitars and sharp as daggers, they served multiple purposes in the Moa's daily life. These were tools for digging, weapons for defense, and anchors for stability on steep terrain. The largest talon on the Mount Owen foot measures over 4 inches in length, a formidable appendage that speaks to the raw power these birds possessed. Modern analysis of the preserved tissue has revealed details about Moa biology that would be impossible to determine from skeletal remains alone. The muscle attachments visible in the foot show how the birds distributed their weight and powered their massive strides. The skin texture provides clues about their adaptation to New Zealand's climate and terrain. Even the pattern of wear on the talons tells stories about how these particular birds lived and what they encountered in their daily lives. The preservation quality of the Mount Owen claw raises fascinating questions about what other organic materials might survive in similar conditions around the world. If a Moa foot could remain virtually unchanged for 3 millennia, what other soft tissue specimens might be waiting in caves, ice, or other protected environments? The discovery has inspired renewed interest in exploring unusual preservation sites that might harbor similar treasures from the past. The emotional impact of seeing such perfectly preserved remains cannot be understated. Unlike skeletal reconstructions that require imagination to bring ancient creatures to life, the Mount Owen foot presents the immediate reality of the Moa's existence. The scales feel real under the touch, the talons gleam with an almost metallic sheen, and the overall presence of the foot conveys the power and majesty of the living bird in ways that no fossil ever could. For the scientists who first examined the specimen, the experience was transformative. Here was a direct connection to New Zealand's lost megafauna, a tangible link to an ecosystem that had been dramatically altered by human arrival. The foot represented not just a scientific specimen, but a memorial to an entire world of giants that had once called New Zealand home. The Moa's extinction story, illuminated by discoveries like the Mount Owen foot, reflects broader patterns of megafauna loss that occurred around the world as human populations expanded into new territories. New Zealand's isolation had allowed its unique ecosystem to develop without mammalian predators, creating opportunities for birds to evolve into ecological niches occupied elsewhere by large mammals. The arrival of humans and the rats, dogs, and pigs they brought with them disrupted this delicate balance with devastating consequences. Archaeological evidence suggests that the last Moa died sometime in the late 1500s, making their extinction relatively recent in geological terms. The Mount Owen foot, dating to 3,000 years ago, represents a creature from the middle period of this extinction process, a time when Moa populations were still robust but had already begun to face pressures from climate change and early human hunting. The preservation of soft tissue in the Mount Owen specimen has allowed scientists to extract DNA samples that provide insights into Moa genetics and evolutionary relationships. These molecular studies have revealed that Moa were more diverse than previously understood, with multiple species exhibiting different adaptations to New Zealand's varied environments. The genetic information preserved in the mummified foot continues to yield new discoveries about these remarkable birds. Museum displays of the Mount Owen Moa foot create profound emotional responses in visitors who encounter it. Unlike other prehistoric specimens that require explanation and imagination to appreciate, the mummified foot needs no interpretation. Its reality is immediate and visceral, creating connections across centuries that make the extinction of the Moa feel like a recent loss rather than ancient history. The discovery has also highlighted the importance of cave exploration and the potential for significant scientific finds in unexpected locations. The three explorers who found the foot were not specifically searching for paleontological specimens, but were simply following their curiosity about the cave system. Their discovery demonstrates how much of our planet's natural history remains hidden, waiting for the right combination of circumstances to bring it to light. Conservation efforts in New Zealand have been partly inspired by discoveries like the Mount Owen Moa foot, which provide tangible reminders of what has been lost and what might still be preserved. The emotional power of seeing such perfectly preserved remains from an extinct species has motivated support for protecting New Zealand's remaining endemic species and restoring damaged ecosystems. The scientific techniques developed to study the Mount Owen specimen have applications far beyond MOA research. Methods for analyzing ancient DNA, for understanding tissue preservation, and for extracting maximum information from rare specimens have all been advanced through work with this remarkable find. The foot has become a case study in how exceptional preservation can provide windows into past ecosystems. Modern conservation biology recognizes that understanding extinction processes requires not just studying how species disappear, but also how they lived and adapted before their final decline. The Mount Owen Moa foot provides precisely this kind of information, offering insights into how these magnificent birds functioned in their environment during their period of abundance. Today, the Mount Owen Moa foot rests in climate-controlled storage at the Museum of New Zealand Te Papa Tongarewa, where it continues to be studied by researchers from around the world. Its preservation remains as remarkable as the day it was discovered, a testament to the power of natural processes to maintain connections across vast spans of time. The foot serves as more than just a scientific specimen. It stands as a monument to the complexity and fragility of island ecosystems, a reminder of how quickly dominant species can vanish when environmental conditions change. In its perfectly preserved scales and fearsome talons, we see reflected both the majesty of what New Zealand once was and the responsibility we bear for protecting what remains. As researchers continue to study this extraordinary specimen, each examination reveals new details about Moa biology, ecology, and extinction. The Mount Owen foot remains one of the most perfectly preserved examples of New Zealand's lost megafauna, a hand reaching across centuries to remind us of giants that once walked among forests that still whisper their names in the mountain winds. Beneath the bustling streets of modern Malta, carved into the living limestone of the Mediterranean island, lies one of the most extraordinary monuments to human ingenuity and spiritual aspiration ever discovered. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni descends through 3 levels of precisely excavated chambers, its walls flowing with curves and contours that seem to breathe with organic life. This is not merely an ancient building, but a 3-dimensional poem written in stone, a testament to builders who understood secrets about sound, space, and the human spirit that we are only beginning to rediscover. The discovery of this underground marvel came about by pure chance in 1902, when workers laying the foundation for a house in the town of Paula struck through the roof of what they initially thought was simply a natural cave. What they had actually uncovered was the entrance to a complex that had been sealed for thousands of years, a sacred space that had waited in darkness since the time when Malta's mysterious temple builders had carved their last chamber and sealed the entrance against the encroaching world above. As archaeologists began to explore the depths of what they soon realized was an intentionally constructed underground temple, they found themselves in the presence of something unprecedented in the archaeological record. Here was not just a burial site or a simple ceremonial space, but an acoustic environment of stunning sophistication. The chambers had been carved with such precision that they created natural amplification effects, allowing whispers to carry clearly across vast spaces while preventing echoes from creating confusion. The builders of the Hypogeum, working sometime between 3,800 and 3,600 years ago, possessed knowledge of acoustic principles that would challenge modern sound engineers. The main chamber, known as the Holy of Holies, contains a carved niche that functions as a perfect resonating chamber. When someone speaks into this space, their voice is amplified and clarified in ways that seem almost supernatural. The effect is so pronounced that many visitors report feeling the vibrations of sound physically as if the stone itself were singing. Modern acoustic analysis has revealed that the Hypogeum was designed to resonate most powerfully at frequencies around 110 to 111 Hz, a specific range that has fascinating effects on human consciousness. Research into the neurological impact of these frequencies has shown that exposure to sounds in this range can alter brainwave patterns, potentially inducing states of heightened awareness, deep relaxation, or even transcendent experience. The ancient builders, working without modern instruments, somehow discovered and harnessed these frequencies for purposes we can only imagine. The chambers themselves flow from one to another with an organic logic that seems to follow the natural contours of consciousness, rather than mere architectural convenience. Visitors moving through the Hypogeum often report a sense of progression, as if the space were designed to guide them through some kind of transformative journey. The lighting effects created by the careful positioning of openings and reflecting surfaces enhance this sense of movement through increasingly sacred space. The carving techniques evident throughout the Hypogeum demonstrate mastery of stoneworking that rivals the greatest achievements of ancient architecture. The walls show no tool marks, no rough edges, no evidence of the laborious chipping and grinding that characterizes most ancient stonework. Instead, the surfaces flow with curves that seem almost molded rather than carved, as if the builders possessed techniques for shaping limestone that we have forgotten or never developed. The Trilithon chamber, one of the most impressive spaces within the complex, recreates in underground form the massive stone architecture that characterizes Malta's above-ground temples. Here, enormous stone slabs have been positioned to create doorways and supports that seem to defy the limitations of underground construction. The engineering required to move such massive stones into position within the confined space of underground chambers speaks to organizational skills and technical knowledge of the highest order. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Hypogeum served not just as a temple, but as a burial site for thousands of individuals over the course of its active use. The careful arrangement of human remains found within the chambers indicates that this was not simply a convenient place to dispose of the dead, but a sacred necropolis where burial itself was part of elaborate ritual processes. The acoustic properties of the space would have transformed funeral ceremonies into experiences of profound emotional and spiritual power. The artistic elements found throughout the Hypogeum provide insights into the spiritual beliefs and aesthetic sensibilities of its builders. The walls are decorated with spirals, dots, and geometric patterns that seem to pulse and flow in the enhanced acoustic environment. These designs, painted in red ochre on the honey-colored limestone, create visual effects that complement the acoustic properties of the space, suggesting that the builders understood the relationship between sight and sound in creating transformative experiences. The Oracle Chamber, perhaps the most famous space within the Hypogeum, demonstrates the sophisticated understanding of acoustic phenomena that characterize the entire complex. This small chamber was designed so that a person speaking within it would have their voice amplified and projected throughout much of the underground complex. The effect is so precise that it seems almost technological in its efficiency, allowing a single speaker to address large numbers of people distributed throughout the various chambers. Recent research into the neurological effects of spending time in acoustically enhanced environments has provided new insights into why ancient peoples might have constructed spaces like the Hypogeum. Studies have shown that exposure to specific frequencies and acoustic conditions can trigger the release of endorphins, alter perception of time, and even induce what researchers describe as transcendent or mystical experiences. The builders of the Hypogeum may have understood these effects intuitively, creating a space designed to facilitate profound spiritual experiences. The mathematical precision evident in the Hypogeum's construction suggests that its builders possessed sophisticated knowledge of geometry and engineering. The proportions of the chambers, the angles of the carved surfaces, and the positioning of acoustic features all demonstrate careful planning and precise execution. This was not intuitive construction but designed architecture that required extensive knowledge of both practical building techniques and theoretical acoustic principles. The preservation of the Hypogeum presents ongoing challenges that reflect the delicate balance between public access and conservation. The breath and body heat of visitors can alter the humidity and temperature conditions that have preserved the site for millennia. Current conservation efforts limit the number of daily visitors while using advanced monitoring systems to track environmental conditions and prevent damage to the irreplaceable acoustic and artistic features. The construction sequence of the Hypogeum reveals that it was built in phases over several centuries, with each generation of builders adding new chambers and refining the acoustic properties of existing spaces. This long-term development suggests that the site served as a kind of experimental laboratory where successive builders tested and perfected their understanding of acoustic architecture. The final result represents the culmination of generations of accumulated knowledge about sound, space, and spiritual experience. The relationship between the Hypogeum and Malta's above-ground temple complexes provides insights into the broader spiritual landscape of ancient Malta. The underground chambers seem to complement and complete the ritual functions of the surface temples, creating a comprehensive sacred geography that encompassed both celestial and chthonic aspects of spiritual experience. The acoustic properties of the Hypogeum would have provided experiences that were impossible to achieve in the open-air temples above. Modern attempts to recreate the acoustic effects of the Hypogeum using computer modeling and digital sound processing have revealed the sophistication of the original design. Even with advanced technology, it remains challenging to create artificial spaces that match the acoustic properties of the ancient chambers. The builders achieved through careful stone carving what modern acousticians struggle to accomplish with electronic equipment and computer-aided design. The symbolic significance of building such an elaborate complex underground reflects ancient understanding of the earth as a source of spiritual power and regeneration. The descent into the Hypogeum becomes a journey into the womb of the earth, a return to the primordial source from which life emerges. The acoustic enhancement of this underground journey would have intensified the psychological and spiritual impact of the experience. The discovery of the Hypogeum challenged early 20th century assumptions about the capabilities of prehistoric peoples. Here was evidence of acoustic engineering that seemed impossible for people working without metal tools or written mathematical systems. The site forced archaeologists to reconsider what ancient builders might have achieved through careful observation, experimentation, and accumulated traditional knowledge. Contemporary visitors to the Hypogeum often report profound emotional responses to the acoustic environment, describing feelings of peace, transcendence, or connection to something larger than themselves. These responses occur regardless of visitors' religious beliefs or cultural backgrounds, suggesting that the acoustic properties of the space trigger universal human responses to sound and spatial experience. Today, as researchers continue to study the Hypogeum using ever more sophisticated analytical techniques, new discoveries emerge regularly about its construction, use, and acoustic properties. The site stands as testament to human creativity and spiritual aspiration, a reminder that our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities that continue to inspire wonder and respect. In its carved chambers and resonating spaces, the Hypogeum preserves not just ancient architecture, but ancient wisdom about the power of sound to transform human consciousness and connect us to the deeper mysteries of existence. In the high desert of New Mexico, where ancient mesas rise like natural cathedrals from the sun-baked earth, the Zuni people have maintained their village of Halona Idawana for more than 1,000 years. Here, in the shadow of red sandstone cliffs that have witnessed countless generations pass like seasons, something extraordinary has persisted through the centuries, a language that seems to whisper of journeys across impossible distances and connections that span the breadth of the Pacific Ocean. The Zuni language, known to its speakers as Shiwima, has long puzzled linguists who attempt to trace its origins and classify its structure. Unlike the languages of neighboring Pueblo peoples, Zuni appears to stand alone, a linguistic island that shares no clear ancestral relationships with any other Native American language family. This isolation would be remarkable enough, but what makes Zuni truly extraordinary are the structural similarities it shares with a language spoken on the other side of the world, Japanese. The discovery of these similarities began in the early 20th century when linguists first began systematic studies of Zuni grammar and vocabulary. What they found challenged every assumption about language development and human migration patterns. Here was a Native American language that seemed to follow grammatical rules more similar to those found in East Asia than anywhere in the Americas. The implications were staggering, and the mystery has only deepened with further study. The structural parallels between Zuni and Japanese are not superficial similarities that might arise by chance. They involve fundamental aspects of how these languages organize meaning and construct sentences. Both languages, for instance, place the verb at the end of the sentence, a grammatical pattern that is relatively rare among world languages. Both use similar methods for creating complex words by adding prefixes and suffixes to root forms. Both employ comparable systems for indicating relationships between sentence elements. Perhaps most intriguingly, both Zuni and Japanese show similar patterns in how they organize sounds and syllables. The phonological structures, the actual sound systems of the languages, display resemblances that seem to echo across the vast Pacific. These are not simply shared words that might have been borrowed through contact, but fundamental similarities in how the languages are constructed at their deepest levels. The vocabulary connections between Zuni and Japanese provide another layer to this linguistic mystery. Researchers have identified dozens of words that appear remarkably similar in both languages, often referring to basic concepts like family relationships, natural phenomena, or cultural practices. While chance resemblances can occur between any two languages, the number and nature of these similarities in Zuni and Japanese exceed what statistical analysis would predict as merely coincidental. Some of the most striking parallels involve words for fundamental human relationships and basic natural concepts. The Zuni word for older sister, for instance, bears striking resemblance to the Japanese equivalent. Terms related to water, earth, and celestial phenomena show similar correspondences. These are not exotic or technical terms that might have been borrowed through recent contact, but basic vocabulary that forms the core of any language, words that children learn first and that remain stable across generations. The grammatical similarities extend to some of the most complex and abstract aspects of language structure. Both Zuni and Japanese use similar methods for creating what linguists call evidentiality markers, grammatical elements that indicate how the speaker knows what they are saying. Both languages have comparable systems for showing respect and social relationships through language structure. These are sophisticated grammatical features that develop over long periods and represent deep cultural knowledge about social interaction and communication. The mystery deepens when we consider the geographical impossibility of contact between these two language communities through known historical channels. The Zuni people have lived in the American Southwest for over a millennium, their oral traditions and archaeological evidence placing them in the region long before any documented contact with Asian peoples. Japanese, meanwhile, developed in isolation on the Japanese islands, with no known historical connections to the Americas before modern times. Traditional models of human migration to the Americas, which trace Native American populations back to crossings from Asia via the Bering Land Bridge, occurred tens of thousands of years ago, long before Japanese as a distinct language had developed. The similarities between Zuni and Japanese appear to represent much more recent linguistic developments, suggesting either contact that occurred within the last few thousand years or parallel development of similar features through unknown mechanisms. Some researchers have proposed that both languages might descend from a common ancestral language spoken by ancient populations that spread across both Asia and the Americas. This hypothetical proto-language would have given rise to descendants in both regions, with Zuni and Japanese retaining more similarities to each other than to their geographical neighbors because of specific historical and cultural factors. However, the time depths required for such a relationship would be enormous, making it difficult to explain why so many specific similarities have been preserved. Another theory suggests that there may have been trans-Pacific contact between Asian and American populations within historical times, contact that allowed for language influence but left little other archaeological evidence. Ocean currents and wind patterns do make trans-Pacific voyages possible, and there is growing evidence that ancient peoples were capable of longer ocean journeys than previously believed. However, the scale of linguistic influence required to explain the Zuni-Japanese similarities would seem to require sustained contact over extended periods. The oral traditions of the Zuni people themselves provide intriguing but ambiguous clues to this linguistic mystery. Zuni creation stories speak of long journeys and migrations that brought their ancestors to their current homeland. Some elements of these traditions have been interpreted as possibly preserving memories of transoceanic voyages, though such interpretations remain highly speculative and are not universally accepted by either linguists or members of the Zuni community. Modern genetic studies of Zuni populations have revealed some unusual patterns that add another dimension to the linguistic mystery. While Zuni people clearly belong to the same broad genetic family as other Native Americans, they show some distinctive characteristics that set them apart from their immediate neighbors. Some researchers have suggested that these genetic markers might indicate ancient contact with Asian populations, though the evidence remains inconclusive and alternative explanations exist. The study of Zuni-Japanese similarities has been complicated by the sensitive nature of research involving Native American communities and the history of exploitation by outside researchers. Many linguists now emphasize the importance of working collaboratively with Zuni speakers and respecting community concerns about how their language is studied and presented. This collaborative approach has enriched understanding of Zuni while ensuring that research serves the interests of the community as well as academic curiosity. Recent advances in computational linguistics have allowed for more sophisticated analysis of the Zuni-Japanese connections. Computer programs can now analyze vast databases of linguistic features across hundreds of languages, providing statistical tools for evaluating the significance of similarities and identifying patterns that might not be apparent to human researchers. These analyses have generally confirmed that the Zuni-Japanese similarities are indeed unusual and unlikely to be purely coincidental. The implications of the Zuni language anomaly extend far beyond linguistics into broader questions about human migration, cultural contact, and the development of civilization. If sustained contact between Asian and American populations did occur in prehistoric times, it would require us to reconsider our understanding of ancient navigation capabilities, cultural exchange networks, and the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations. The mystery has also highlighted the importance of documenting and preserving endangered languages like Zuni. As globalization and cultural assimilation pressure threaten linguistic diversity around the world, languages like Zuni become repositories of irreplaceable information about human history and cultural development. The unique features that make Zuni linguistically puzzling also make it scientifically invaluable as a window into language change and human migration patterns. Contemporary Zuni speakers, while proud of their language's uniqueness, often view the academic debates about its origins with a mixture of interest and caution. For them, Zuni is not primarily a scientific puzzle, but a living language that carries their cultural knowledge, spiritual traditions, and community identity. The ongoing vitality of Zuni as a spoken language ensures that future research will continue to benefit from the insights of native speakers. The search for additional evidence to explain the Zuni-Japanese connection continues through multiple channels. Archaeologists look for material evidence of trans-Pacific contact, while linguists develop new methods for analyzing language relationships across vast time depths. Genetic researchers investigate population histories, and oral historians work to preserve and interpret traditional knowledge that might contain clues to ancient migrations. Each new discovery in fields ranging from oceanography to genetics provides potential new pieces to the puzzle of Zuni's linguistic isolation and its surprising connections to distant Japanese. The mystery remains unsolved, but the ongoing research continues to reveal new dimensions of human linguistic diversity and the complex pathways through which languages develop and change over time. Today, as Zuni children learn their ancestral language alongside English, they inherit not just a means of communication, but a living mystery that connects them to questions about human history that span continents and millennia. In every conversation in Shawima, in every story told in the ancient words, the puzzle persists. waiting for future generations of speakers and scholars to unlock the secrets hidden in syllables that seem to echo across the vast Pacific, carrying whispers of journeys and connections that challenge everything we think we know about the ancient world. In the dense rainforests of Costa Rica, where the morning mist rises from rivers that wind through landscapes unchanged since the dawn of time, there rest hundreds of stone spheres so perfectly round that they seem to mock the very concept of natural formation. These are the Dike spheres, scattered across the Dikes Delta like giant marbles left by gods at play, each one a testament to human ambition and an enduring mystery that has puzzled archaeologists for nearly a century. The spheres range in size from mere inches to massive monuments over 8 feet in diameter, some weighing as much as 16 tons. They are carved from gabbro, a hard volcanic rock that requires tremendous skill and patience to shape. Yet despite the difficulty of working with such unforgiving material, the ancient craftsmen who created these spheres achieved a level of perfection that borders on the supernatural. Many are so precisely round that modern instruments can detect no significant deviation from perfect spherical geometry. The first scientific attention to these remarkable objects came in the 1940s, when workers clearing land for banana plantations in the Dikes Delta began uncovering sphere after sphere buried in the jungle soil. Word of the discoveries reached archaeologist Doris Stone, who recognized immediately that these were not natural formations but deliberate creations of extraordinary sophistication. Her initial studies revealed that the spheres were distributed across a wide area and appeared to be arranged in meaningful patterns. The creators of these spheres possessed knowledge and techniques that challenge our understanding of pre-Columbian technology. Working without metal tools, they somehow managed to shape blocks of extremely hard stone into perfect spheres using only stone implements and abrasive materials. The precision they achieved rivals that of modern machine tools, suggesting mastery of geometric principles and stoneworking techniques that represent one of the highest achievements of ancient craftsmanship. Recent analysis has revealed that many of the spheres were positioned with astronomical precision, aligned with celestial events or cardinal directions in ways that suggest sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and surveying. Some groupings appear to represent star patterns or seasonal markers, indicating that the spheres served purposes beyond mere decoration or status symbols. They were functional components of a complex system for tracking time and celestial movements. The techniques used to create such perfect spheres remain largely mysterious. Experiments by modern stoneworkers have shown that achieving spherical perfection with stone tools requires not just skill but intimate knowledge of geometric principles and access to sophisticated measuring techniques. The ancient craftsmen would have needed to understand concepts of radius, circumference, and three-dimensional geometry at levels that suggest formal mathematical knowledge rather than intuitive craft skills. Some researchers have proposed that the spheres were shaped using a technique involving careful measurement and gradual material removal, guided by string compasses and other simple but precise measuring tools. The process would have required enormous patience and skill, with artisans spending months or even years on individual spheres. The investment of time and labor represented by the largest spheres suggests that they held profound cultural and spiritual significance for their creators. The distribution of the spheres across the landscape appears to follow patterns that connect them to important geographical features like river confluences, mountain peaks, and other natural landmarks. This suggests that the spheres were components of a larger system for marking and understanding the relationship between human settlements and the natural world. They may have served as territorial markers, astronomical observation points, or sacred sites within a complex spiritual geography. Archaeological excavation around the spheres has revealed that many were originally positioned on specially prepared foundations of smaller stones. These careful placements suggest that the exact positioning of each sphere was crucial to its function, whether practical or ceremonial. Some spheres appear to have been moved from their original locations multiple times, indicating that they played active roles in changing cultural practices rather than serving as static monuments. The cultural context of the spheres places them within the broader tradition of sophisticated stoneworking that characterized many pre-Columbian Central American civilizations. The peoples of the Dodecahedra region were accomplished architects and engineers who built complex settlements, elaborate irrigation systems, and monumental stone architecture. The spheres represent the pinnacle of this stoneworking tradition, demonstrating capabilities that equal or exceed those of any ancient civilization. The symbolic meaning of perfect spherical form in ancient Costa Rican culture remains largely unknown due to the absence of written records from the pre-Columbian period. However, the sphere is a powerful symbol in many world cultures, representing perfection, completeness, and cosmic unity. The enormous effort required to create perfect stone spheres suggests that this symbolism was deeply important to the peoples of the Dodecahedra region. Some spheres show evidence of having been deliberately broken or damaged, possibly during Spanish colonial period when indigenous cultural sites were often destroyed or abandoned. The survival of so many intact examples is remarkable given the centuries of neglect and the valuable materials from which they are made. Local traditions often attribute magical properties to the spheres, and many have been incorporated into folk beliefs about hidden treasures and supernatural powers. Modern conservation efforts face significant challenges in protecting the spheres from both natural and human threats. Many remain in remote jungle locations where they are vulnerable to erosion, vegetation damage, and illegal removal by artifact hunters. Others have been moved to museums or public spaces where they can be better protected but lose their original cultural and geographical context. The precision of the spheres has inspired numerous theories about the technological capabilities of their creators. Some researchers have suggested that the ancient Costa Ricans possessed advanced knowledge of mathematics and geometry that was transmitted through formal educational systems. Others propose that the sphere-making tradition developed through centuries of accumulated craft knowledge passed down through specialized artisan families. Recent three-dimensional scanning technology has revealed details about sphere construction that were previously invisible to researchers. These studies show that even the largest spheres maintain their perfect geometry throughout their volume, indicating that the shaping process achieved precision not just on the surface but throughout the entire stone mass. This level of accuracy requires sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional geometry and remarkable skill in execution. The geographic distribution of the spheres extends beyond the Dodecahedra Delta to other parts of Costa Rica and even into neighboring countries, suggesting that sphere-making was part of a broader cultural tradition that spanned large areas of Central America. The similarities in technique and precision across this wide distribution indicate either direct cultural contact between distant communities or shared technological knowledge that spread through trade networks. Some spheres appear to have been carved with additional features like grooves or platforms that may have served specific functional purposes. These modifications suggest that different spheres served different roles within the overall system, possibly as astronomical instruments, ceremonial focal points, or markers for specific types of activities. The variety of sizes and modifications indicates a sophisticated understanding of how form follows function in symbolic architecture. The quarrying and transportation of the raw materials for the largest spheres represents an engineering challenge that equals their actual carving. The gabbro used for many spheres was quarried from specific locations in the mountains and transported across difficult terrain to reach their final positions. This logistics effort required organization and planning capabilities that speak to sophisticated social structures and leadership systems. Contemporary indigenous communities in Costa Rica maintain oral traditions that reference the spheres, though the specific knowledge of their creation and original purposes has been largely lost. These traditions often attribute the spheres to ancient giants or supernatural beings, reflecting the awe that perfect stone spheres continue to inspire even among peoples familiar with sophisticated stone working traditions. The ongoing discovery of new spheres in remote jungle locations suggests that many more remain to be found and studied. Each new discovery provides additional data about distribution patterns, construction techniques, and cultural contexts, gradually building a more complete picture of this remarkable achievement in ancient stoneworking. The spheres continue to yield new insights about the capabilities and cultural complexity of pre-Columbian Central American civilizations. Modern artists and craftspeople who have attempted to recreate the sphere-making process using traditional tools and techniques have gained profound appreciation for the skill and knowledge required to achieve such precision. Their experiments have revealed that creating perfect stone spheres requires not just physical skill, but deep understanding of mathematical principles and extraordinary patience and dedication to the craft. The Dodecahedra spheres stand today as monuments to human perfectibility and the power of focused intention to overcome material limitations. In their perfect geometry and enduring presence, they remind us that ancient peoples were capable of achievements that continue to inspire wonder and respect. Each sphere represents countless hours of skilled labor dedicated to achieving an ideal of perfection that transcends mere utility to become art of the highest order. Today, as these stone spheres rest in museums and protected sites around the world, they continue to challenge our understanding of ancient capabilities and inspire questions about the relationship between knowledge, skill, and cultural meaning. In their silent perfection, they preserve mysteries about their creators' intentions and techniques, waiting for future researchers to unlock the secrets hidden within their flawless geometric forms that seem to embody the eternal human desire to create something perfect in an imperfect world. As the last notes of our journey through time fade into the silence of contemplation, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a vast ocean of questions that stretches beyond the horizon of human knowledge. We have walked among floating cities of stone and held weapons forged with impossible steel. We have traced the flight paths of wooden birds and felt the resonance of underground chambers carved by hands that understood secrets we are only beginning to rediscover. Each mystery we have encountered speaks to something fundamental about the human experience. In the massive stones of Nan Madol, perfectly fitted without mortar across impossible distances, we see the power of vision to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. In the impossibly long reigns recorded in the Sumerian king list, we glimpse ancient attempts to measure time itself, to capture in finite numbers the infinite sweep of cosmic cycles that dwarf individual human lives. The Ulfberht swords remind us that knowledge has always traveled along paths we cannot fully trace, that mastery and innovation have never respected the boundaries we draw between civilizations and ages. The little wooden bird from Saqqara whispers of dreams that transcend the limitations of technology, of human imagination reaching toward possibilities that reason says should be impossible. In the 12-sided puzzles scattered across the Roman world, we confront the humbling reality that even the most thoroughly documented civilizations can vanish, leaving behind objects that outlast all memory of their purposes. The Piri Reis Map challenges our assumptions about who knew what and when they knew it, suggesting that the boundaries between the known and unknown have always been more fluid than our histories acknowledge. The perfectly preserved claw reaching across millennia from Mount Owen caves connects us viscerally to worlds that have vanished, ecosystems that once thrived in abundance but now exist only in memory and fossil. In its startling preservation, we see how thin the line between presence and absence truly is, how quickly the dominant can become the extinct. The acoustic chambers beneath Malta speak to ancient understanding of how sound and space can transform consciousness, how the careful arrangement of stone and void can create experiences that transcend the merely physical. In those resonating depths, we hear echoes of knowledge about the relationship between environment and spiritual experience that our modern world has largely forgotten. The linguistic bridges that seem to span the Pacific in Zuni syllables challenge every assumption about isolation and contact, about how ideas and sounds can travel across impossible distances through channels we cannot identify. In those mysterious word patterns, we glimpse the possibility that human connection has always been more extensive and complex than our maps can show. The perfect spheres scattered across Costa Rican jungles embody humanity's eternal desire to create something flawless, to impose geometric perfection on resistant stone through nothing but skill, patience, and vision. In their silent roundness, they preserve the memory of achievement that required no written instructions, no machines, no power beyond human will and understanding. These mysteries share certain qualities that set them apart from the ordinary puzzles of archaeology and history. They possess a kind of temporal displacement, existing in their times yet seeming to belong to others. They demonstrate capabilities that challenge our understanding of what was possible with available technology. They suggest knowledge that appears to have no clear source or transmission path. They embody achievements that seem to require not just skill but wisdom that transcends their apparent cultural contexts. Perhaps most importantly, these mysteries remind us that the relationship between past and present is not the simple progression we often imagine. Knowledge is gained and lost, techniques are developed and forgotten, achievements are reached and then become unreachable. The arrow of time does not always point toward greater capability or deeper understanding. Sometimes the ancients knew things we have yet to rediscover. In our age of global communication and digital preservation, it is easy to assume that important knowledge cannot simply vanish. Yet these mysteries suggest otherwise. They hint at traditions of learning and making that left no written records, passed down through generations of practitioners until the chain was broken by war, plague, cultural change, or simple neglect. They remind us that much of what humans have accomplished may have been preserved only in memory, vulnerable to loss in ways that stone and metal are not. The search for explanations of these mysteries has led researchers down countless paths of investigation, each one revealing new layers of complexity in ancient achievements. Archaeological techniques grow more sophisticated, scientific analysis becomes more precise, computational models achieve greater accuracy. Yet somehow the mysteries persist, adapting to new forms of inquiry while maintaining their essential elusiveness. This persistence suggests that these mysteries serve functions beyond simply challenging our knowledge. They provide spaces for wonder in a world increasingly mapped and measured. They offer permission to imagine possibilities beyond the constraints of current understanding. They remind us that certainty is often illusion, that the unknown continues to surround and interpenetrate the known in ways that keep life mysterious and meaningful. As we rest now in the quiet aftermath of our journey through these ancient puzzles, we carry with us not answers but better questions. We have been reminded that human creativity and capability have always exceeded the boundaries of conventional expectation. We have seen that knowledge and achievement take forms that resist easy categorization or explanation. The echo of mystery that sounds through all these discoveries is not a failure of understanding, but an invitation to humility. It calls us to approach the past with wonder rather than certainty, to remain open to possibilities that challenge our assumptions about what ancient peoples could achieve. It reminds us that the most profound discoveries often begin not with answers, but with the recognition that our questions have been too small. In the end, these mysteries persist because they speak to something essential in human nature, our drive to reach beyond the possible, to create meaning and beauty that transcends purely practical needs, to leave behind achievements that inspire wonder in generations yet to come. They are echoes of the human spirit across time, proof that our ancestors shared our deepest aspirations and perhaps exceeded our greatest achievements. The search continues, as it always has and always will. New discoveries await in archive and excavation, in laboratory analysis and theoretical insight. But whatever we learn, whatever secrets we unlock, the essential mystery will remain: the inexhaustible creativity of the human spirit and its power to transform vision into reality across any obstacle time can place in its path. Sleep now and dream of floating cities and perfect spheres, of impossible maps and resonating chambers, of the endless human capacity to create wonders that echo across the centuries, whispering their secrets to any who have ears to hear the music of mystery itself.